Hello ladies and gents, this is topic 1 for Elizabeth and we're concentrating here on the situation on Elizabeth's accession to the throne, and we are going to look at her government too. In order to describe some of the events of Elizabeth's reign, you do need to know a little bit about the Tudor story. So just as a reminder here, her father is Henry VIII and he is recognised for the Reformation of the Church, whereby he changes the 400-year-old tradition of Catholicism in England to Protestantism. This causes problems for Elizabeth because the Catholics argue throughout her reign that she is illegitimate due to her father's marriage to her mother, Anne Boleyn, not being legally recognised. He also does other things during his reign that impact her, such as souring relations with the papacy, the Pope, and also closing the monasteries, which are going to cause problems for vagrants in Elizabeth's era later on. We don't really need to know too much about Edward, but it's worth mentioning about Mary that she is strictly Catholic, and when Elizabeth inherits the throne, she has the challenge of changing the church back to the Protestant church. Elizabeth herself, she's a moderate Protestant. She is recognised for her religious settlement, finding the middle way, and at the start she doesn't want to be too tough on Catholics in retaliation for their treatment of Protestants under Mary's reign. It's also worth mentioning some differences between our Protestant and Catholic Church here, just so you are aware of what's going on. So just as a reminder, in the Catholic Church, the Pope is the head of the church. This causes problems for monarchs because they have to listen to a foreign power. And in the Protestant Church, it is the monarch who is the head of the church. In a Catholic Church, there are some traditional ways, such as the service and the Bible is in Latin, and they believe that priests can perform miracles, such as transubstantiation, where the priest performs a kind of magical ceremony where wine is the blood of Christ and bread or the little wafer becomes the body of Christ. Protestants really don't like these miracles. They think they are very superstitious and very, very Catholic. Priests are also regarded as slightly better off than people in the Catholic Church, so better off than normal people. So, for example, they wear different clothing, vestments, which make them stand out. And in a Protestant church, there is not this same belief that priests are above the everyday person and they should not wear special clothing in recognition of this. So to begin, you need to know the hierarchy of Elizabethan England and how Elizabeth helps this rule her country. At the very top, we have Elizabeth, and she reigns via divine right. This is the belief that she is chosen by God, and therefore she's pretty much perfect. We then, underneath her, have the nobility. Now, the nobility help her rule the country in various different ways. So when she inherits the kingdom, there are lots of ancient Catholic families that have power, and Mary I has given them that power under her reign. Now, Elizabeth doesn't want Catholic nobles to have lots of power because she is Protestant. So there's going to be a transition of her giving the Protestant nobles the better job, the better lands, etc. So nobility are normally born rich, they've got land, they've got titles, and they are quite often the group of people that follow her from court to court, and they are entertaining her, and she can do various things to keep them loyal, which I'll talk about on the next couple of slides. Underneath the nobility, we have the gentry. There is a little bit of movement within the gentry, so at this time, a very wealthy merchant or perhaps a yeoman farmer is able to move up into the lower gentry, but otherwise, pretty much the way you're born in Elizabethan England is where you stay. So gentry own land, but not necessarily titles, like knights, for example. Yeomen are the wealthier farmers that own the land, and tenant farmers rent land from yeomen. The labouring poor have no claims to land and they just work on the land for relatively little money. Outside of our hierarchy are the vagrants. Now, they cause a problem for people because they have no master. If you are wandering and you are unemployed, you've got nobody telling you what to do or how to behave, and this causes a problem. The reason that Elizabeth has to use this structure to help her rule England is there is obviously no police force at this time and no permanent standing army. So she has to rely on other people to be her eyes and ears throughout the country. Everyone has to have a master in order to keep law and order. It's also worth noting that there's a social hierarchy in the towns as well, and it works in the same way, where everybody has a master and it helps keep law and order. So at the very top we have our merchants. These are our emerging businessmen. As England is becoming a little bit more global, business is expanding. We know that England are very focused on the wool trade because we have the perfect climate for it. And we do business with the Netherlands. We export our wool and they turn it into cloth, and it makes both of us quite rich. The expansion of wool, as more people turn from arable farming to sheep farming, means that there is a new merchant class. So there's this kind of new emerging class of businessmen, and they're making lots of money, and these are the ones that might be able to make it into the gentry class here. So there's a little bit of social mobility, a little bit of movement. It's really important that merchants have peace in the kingdom, because if there is not peace, if there is problems or tensions with Spain in the Netherlands, it's going to damage trade. The other thing that merchants need is education as well. So reading and maths, arithmetic become really important because merchants need these skills for business. Underneath our merchants we have our professional trades, so teachers, doctors and clergy, and underneath them we have our skilled craftsmen. So they might own a business where you have a skill such as carpentry or a weaver or a tailor, and they will employ several craftsmen in their business. Underneath them we have our unskilled labourers, and they will do your small low paid tasks, a little bit like a farm labourer but in a town. Again, this works because everybody has a master to answer to, and also the boss above them, the employer, owes them a duty of care to look after them, and this promotes business and it protects business. You may get asked a question in which you will need to explain the hierarchy of government, so I'm going to take you through that next. So how does Elizabeth use the government to help her rule England? We know at the top she believes in divine right, as do many other people, that she is picked by God. She has several powers that she uses in her reign to keep law and order or to keep people loyal. So she is the only one that can declare war and peace, but she very much needs Parliament to be on side with these decisions, especially when it comes to war, because wars are expensive and you normally need to raise tax to do this. She can call and dismiss Parliament, and she can agree or reject two laws. She didn't use Parliament that much during her reign, but she did tend to get on quite well with them, and they did generally agree with what she was asking for. She also had the power to make proclamations. Proclamations are just royal orders. I guess they're a little bit like a law, and she doesn't need Parliament to necessarily agree to this, but they normally do. They are direct orders, and for example, the religious settlement was a proclamation. She also has the power to use royal prerogative. Now, prerogative is something that only a queen is allowed to decide or discuss. And in her reign, she declares that foreign policy, marriage and succession are out of bounds for Parliament. They are not allowed to discuss this for her. So just as a reminder, marriage was a contentious issue as was succession. Succession is choosing who has the throne after you, and Parliament did pressure her to make these decisions because they did not want a civil war. If people are aware that there is a weak leader or that there has not been an adequate successor named, it might cause a civil war. Nonetheless, Elizabeth declares that she's married to England and they are not allowed to discuss this. She also has the power to grant titles, land and money, and also jobs, and this is called patronage. This is a way to keep nobles loyal to her. Now, earlier on in this slideshow, I mentioned that she inherited the land as a Catholic one, and she changes this to Protestant. She doesn't want to upset the Catholic nobles too much because quite often they have retainers, which are private armies, and she doesn't want them to start a rebellion. So she wants to keep things peaceful and she needs to keep her Protestant nobles on side. The way that she can do this is she might say that a certain noble is the only one that can import a certain wine from a certain region and this will make them rich. Or they might be the only ones that are allowed to sell salt. And this is called a monopoly. In the same breath here, she could also take those things away from nobles, such as Catholics. And if you fell out of favour with the Queen, you could also have those things taken away from you. In terms of who helps her lead, she has two notable Secretaries of State that we need to know about. The first is Sir William Cecil and the second is Sir Francis Walsingham. Now, both of these men are picked on merit. They aren't necessarily from the highest born families, and sometimes they are disliked by nobles, especially those Catholic nobles that are still hanging on. Now, they are the closest advisor to the Queen and they give her really, really important advice about some of these tricky issues that she has to make decisions on. They tend to lead the Privy Council and they also have to watch out for spies inside and outside of England on Elizabeth's behalf. Next we have Parliament, and Parliament are a little bit different in this era. The Commons and the Lords they kind of function in the same way in that the laws and the requests for taxation go through them, but the people that are in Parliament are mainly chosen by Elizabeth. There's two things that Parliament can really do, and one is raising extraordinary taxation. So they can grant permission for Elizabeth to raise a tax when she needs to raise money for something important like a war. They definitely have to agree to this. She can't really do this without them. The other thing they can do is agree or reject royal proclamations, but as I said earlier, they tend to work in harmony and she normally agrees to these. Next, we're going to have a look at hierarchy within the government. And we're going to start with the courtiers. So just as a reminder, the court isn't like a legal courthouse. It's a series of palaces and homes that Elizabeth stays at, and it's the people that follow her around. So if you do that, you're a noble and you're known as a courtier, somebody that is at court. It's made up of the nobility and friends of the monarch, and they are quite close to the Queen. They can have some influence on her if they are at the same parties and banquets and dinners. They might get a little bit of an private audience with the Queen and be able to discuss issues with her. So, for example, you might recommend somebody that you know to become a member of Parliament if you could get close enough to Elizabeth to ask. You have to be invited, and equally, if you annoy her, you can very much be disinvited from her court. A courtier's job is to entertain the Queen. They attend dinners and dances with her. And they give her court gossip as well. They let her know what's going on. Next, we have the Privy Council, and there are generally about 19 members on this. It can change, and it is led by the Secretary of State, as mentioned earlier, Cecil or Walsingham. They deal with the day-to-day running of England, so they look at issues that need debating, they monitor enemies, and they also monitor law and order. So they get fed back information on any signs or sounds of rebellion around England. They meet about 3 times a week, and now and again the Queen would attend these, and she was known for having a bit of a temper and raising her voice at some of these men. But she was quite clever in picking men that didn't necessarily all agree with her. Sometimes they had opposing ideas because she really wanted the best advice. Next, we have Parliament, and they are made up of the House of Lords, of which you will find nobles and bishops, and the House of Commons, who are made up of knights. These guys are responsible for passing laws and taxes, and the House of Commons are normally picked by privy councillors. So it's not like our MPs today, which can come from any background. They tend to be your wealthy and well-off people. She rarely calls Parliament, and they help instruct local government with what they need to do, and I'm going to talk about the role of local government next. In our local government, we have the Lord's Lieutenant. This is still a job that exists today, although it's not in the same way. A member of nobility is normally chosen to be a Lord Lieutenant, and their job is to make sure that in the local area they can raise a militia. That is to make sure some men are trained militarily in case Elizabeth suddenly needs to declare war. So they have a little bit of a practice each month. There's one in every county, and they also have to report on any political ongoings or religious activity. This is because Elizabeth doesn't have a local police force, and there is no other way really to find out what's going on across the country. And they are really important nationally for maintaining defences of the country, so if she needs to call a standing army. Next, we have the Justices of the Peace, and you have definitely heard of these before. They are normally the large landowner in an area, and they are normally gentry. So you might find your yeoman farmers are able to become Justices of the Peace. They are unpaid, but the status that it gets you makes people want to do it. They judge on court cases in the local area, and they make sure policies are carried out, such as the vagrancy laws or perhaps the religious settlement as well. Also, they're responsible for things like poor relief. Nationally, they also keep an eye on law and order, and they feed back to the Privy Council any signs or signs of rebellion. The final 2 things we're going to look at here are Elizabeth's political challenges at home and abroad. So there's lots you could say here. If this was to come up as a 12 or 16 marker, you've got absolutely loads of knowledge you can use. And it is absolutely okay here if you take some information from different categories here. And you can even repeat information, that's completely okay. So when she comes to the throne, one of the big problems is legitimacy for Elizabeth. So what do I mean by that? Being legitimate means being born in wedlock. That means your parents are legally married, and Elizabeth's parents were married, but if you remember rightly, Catholics had a problem with Henry's divorce from Catherine of Aragon. That is Henry's first wife. The Pope rejected Henry's request to have a divorce, so he reformed the church and just took a divorce anyway. Then he married Anne Boleyn, who is Elizabeth's mother. Catholics claim that the marriage between Henry and Anne Boleyn is not legally recognised, and therefore Elizabeth is a bastard and she is not the rightful queen. Further to this, Henry does exclude her from succession as well, so he does not name her as the successor to the throne. And again, this is a way for the Catholics to claim that she is not legitimate. So it's just something that the Catholics can use to criticise her the whole way through her reign. This also leaves her vulnerable to being replaced by a Catholic monarch, of which we'll come to in another video. In terms of religion, she's a fairly tolerant Protestant when she takes the throne, and she's not too harsh on the Catholics at first. She wants to see a middle way being rolled out across the country because she doesn't want a civil war. So this means that when she takes the throne, she's going to make sure that Protestant is the official religion of England, but that the Catholics are able to practice in private perhaps, and she'll leave them alone as long as they're not causing her any trouble. She has to be very, very careful though, because we know that there is a stronghold of Catholicism in France and in Spain, and she doesn't want to be vulnerable to a foreign invasion. We also have the problem of debt when she takes the throne. The treasury is about £300,000 in debt, mostly due to Mary I and some of her bad decisions. Further, England is vulnerable, just as other European countries are, to failed harvests. And what she does not want to do is tax the people to pay for England's debt, because this could lead to an uprising against her, especially at a time when there's failed harvests and there's lots of people struggling. There are other ways that she can raise money, including charging custom duties from things being imported into England, and she can charge rents on Crown lands. So, this is any land that she owns or the Crown owns. She also can raise income from criminals. When they are put on trial, the property goes to the Crown, and she can also ask her noble friends for loans and simply never pay them back. And these are maybe some things she can do in order to not upset her people by charging high taxes. We also have the problem of gender. So there's a few things here that we might be able to repeat, but traditionally women are under the authority of men. So for example, a daughter is obedient to her father, and then when she's married off, she's obedient to her husband. Traditionally, women are not in charge. They are considered to be emotional or dependent on a male advisor. And another thing to mention here is this is still a time when monarchs led men into battle, and she simply could not do that on a battlefield. The other thing to mention here is her sister Mary as well, and she hasn't left a very good legacy. I'll move on to Mary now in her own right. So Mary I is also known as Bloody Mary. Please do not confuse her with Mary Queen of Scots. Two big Marys in our stories, but we are talking about Mary I here. So Mary married Philip II of Spain, and this marriage was an unpopular one, partly because she's married a foreign king who dragged her into foreign wars using England's cash here. And one of the things that happens under Mary's reign is losing the strategic French port of Calais, and this is a port that makes England pretty rich, and now it's been lost to France. She leaves England in a bad financial state, and she is quite a strict Catholic and hasn't treated the Protestants all that well during her reign, including allowing 300 Protestants to burn for heresy. This means that people believe that women are perhaps bad rulers, and obviously we also have those Protestants who, when Elizabeth comes to power, they have decided that they would like revenge for their treatment at the hands of Mary. So we have some Protestants would like Elizabeth being harsher on those Catholics that are still in England. We also have the problem of marriage and children. So there is lots of pressure from Parliament on Elizabeth to marry so that she has an heir to the throne. This will keep England peaceful and not leave them at a risk of civil war. She turns down several marriage proposals, including one from Philip II of Spain, who was previously married to her sister. This causes some tension. Elizabeth claims that she does not want to lose power by sharing the crown with a foreign husband and declares that she is simply married to England. Parliament do keep that pressure on to pick a successor. In order to prevent Parliament from keeping this pressure on, she says that this is a royal prerogative, it is not for them to discuss, and she declares that she is the Virgin Queen. She is simply married to England. Finally then, just to talk about her personality, she is very highly educated. She can speak multiple languages and she understands how courts work. She understands the politics and she surrounds herself with very intelligent and clever men to give her the best possible advice. She makes great speeches and she connects with her subjects. And she is able to show her authority, which is very important because some continental countries, some countries in Europe might be looking at England and seeing a weak, vulnerable female ruler. She portrays herself as the Virgin Queen, as mentioned earlier, in order that she's not controlled by a foreign husband and that he doesn't use English finances to fund wars, just like happened under Mary. However, the problem here, and the reason that Parliament are a little bit upset, is it can leave her without a foreign alliance, an international alliance, to leave England not in a vulnerable position. She can be indecisive and cautious, and sometimes this is a criticism of Elizabeth, but some might argue that she saw how Mary rushed into decisions and this left England in a far worse state. She could also show her temper at court with her Privy Council, and this might be a way that she was asserting control over quite a male dominated space. Finally, then, we have her political challenges abroad when she inherits the throne. So, when she inherits the throne, France is still a traditional enemy. We have been at war for many years. It's Catholic, which is a problem because we are Protestant. And also, they've made alliances with Scotland called the Old Alliance. And this basically puts a country that is very close to us, i.e., Scotland, we share a border with them. It gives them an alliance so France could maybe use Scotland as a leap pad to launch an attack on England. Also, Scotland are a problem because it's quite hard to defend the border, it's remote. Mary, Queen of Scots, is also the monarch there, and she is Catholic, and this means she's a suitable replacement for Elizabeth should there be an invasion. Finally, we have Spain. France and Spain are no longer at war. This is a problem. Elizabeth needs that distraction, so France aren't focusing on England. Spain is very Catholic. Elizabeth's upset Philip by turning down his marriage proposal. And Spain is richer than us, and they are grabbing land in the Americas much quicker than we are able to. So we've got a few challenges abroad here.